and literally said to my husband, I think we could make a better one.
Pluie, Pluie, Pluie. Welcome back to the Wild Business Growth Podcast. This is your place to hear from a new entrepreneur every single Wednesday morning who's turning wild ideas into wild growth. I'm your host, Max Branstetter, founder and podcast producer at MaxPodcasting. And you can email me at max@maxpodcasting.com to save time with your high-quality podcast. This is episode 160, Naughty But Nice, and today's guest is Addie Gundry. Addie is the founder and CEO of Pluie. Pluie is the world's first and only self-sanitizing, diaper-changing table made for public restrooms. It is an incredibly cool diaper-changing table, totally different than anything you've ever seen before. And in this interview, we talk everything from creating Pluie, what Pluie even means, what it's like using technology to solve the crazy problem of messy baby diapers. So Pluie plus some of the really cool stuff Addie was up to before Pluie, including the Food Network, Martha Stewart, yada, yada. Yeah, nothing really exciting there. It is the Addie G Show. Enjoy the show. Alrighty, we are here with Addie Gundry, the founder and CEO. That's, CEO is really tough to say. That doesn't get enough attention. CEO of Pluie, one of the coolest companies changing the game for babies, parents, pretty much the whole world as well. Addie, thanks for joining. How you doing today?
Thank you so much, Max. Happy to be here.
Of course. And hopefully, if any other acronyms come up, I will have no trouble with them because it's really tough these days. But really excited to get to your baby changing story today. But before we do that, you are one of a very select few people who have been cooking on TV. How was that experience?
That's a good question. Yes, my career has pivoted dramatically in some sense in that my whole history prior to Pluie was culinary related. I often joke I'm still in restaurants, but just now in the restroom. So spending time by the toilets versus the stove. But I did have the opportunity to cook on Cutthroat Kitchen twice, where I won an episode. And that was one of the most wild experiences ever.
Ooh, wild. Nicely done.
Wild. Had the pleasure of being on the Food Network star, Bobby Flay and Giada. And it was just such an incredible opportunity to meet people. I spent about 8 weeks in Los Angeles where we were sequestered to film, which is an experience in itself, being on the camera and then being behind the scenes during these productions is just really kind of an opportunity of a lifetime in terms of just learning about yourself, learning about what it's like to perform. And although I no longer cook, I do think the television experience has prepared me for what I do now, which is I'm always sort of selling what I'm doing. But cooking on TV is cool. I'll tell you one thing right now, it is very real. A lot of people might think like, oh, they cut, they pause, they're not really cooking, or they get an hour instead of 30 minutes. And I will tell you right now, if they give you 30 minutes to cook something, you have 30 minutes to cook it. And I think they have to make it so real because we are not actors. And so if we had extra time, we would not be frantic and stressed. And so to really foster that environment and energy, it is like, here's what you're cooking, go. And so that's a fun thing to know when you're watching these shows, is that it's pretty genuine.
And I'm genuinely stressed because that countdown clock, when you're watching it, it is extremely stressful. It's fun to watch. I mean, I love those shows. My mom, brother especially, love all the cooking shows and Food Network shows and everything there.
Well, and I was pregnant with my son when I was filming Food Network Star, but no one knew because it was pretty early on. So I was about 7 weeks pregnant when I left for Los Angeles. And then when I returned home, I was like 13 weeks or 14. So I hid this the whole time. It really mattered, but I was nauseous there was one point Bobby Flay didn't really like my dish. It didn't have enough seasoning. And I was just dying to be like, dude, I'm pregnant. I didn't taste it. Like, I feel sick. But I never told anyone until the finale, when then I was like full on 9 months pregnant. So
Oh my God. You had a lot more going on than just the cooking even. You've met Bobby Flay in person. You've met Giada in person. You've even worked pretty closely with Martha Stewart over the years. What's something about working with Martha Stewart that you still think back to and kind of are grateful for years later?
Oh, that's a great question. She's an incredibly inspiring person, I think, for people who see her on TV and magazines, and then for people who know her. And, one thing I learned from her, and her high standard of quality that I still think about honestly daily, is that she worked so hard. And so what was interesting is, like, she was so demanding. She had such a specific way of doing things and a high, like I said, standard for how it was done. But she emailed in the middle of the night, and she came into the kitchen and moved food on the plate before the photo shoot. And she chose every single cover image of Martha Stewart living. And so I think seeing someone so powerful in her position, someone who built this empire, but then someone so involved to every decision and who really put in the time and effort, was really inspiring. I think there's a lot of CEOs or founders who get to a certain point in their career where then they are very hands off, but then still kind of demanding, right? And so what was really neat about her is that, she did just get so involved. And I think that was something everyone really respected.
The attention to details off the charts. I always find it inspiring when you hear about these people like Martha that are seemingly larger than life and have done so much in their career, everything from cookbooks to now like the budding partnership with Snoop Dogg.
Budding is a good word.
Oh my God. I didn't even realize that. Wow. Great call. But how did you meet Martha in the first place?
Yeah, so I was working for Thomas Keller, who has the French Laundry, which is one of his most well-known restaurants in the Napa Valley area. And I was out in New York where he has Per Se and opening Bouchon Rock Center. So I was there with Thomas and his fiance at the time, now wife, Laura Cunningham, and she introduced me to the editor-in-chief of Martha Stewart Living, who was Pilar Guzman. And her then content director, I forget her title, but Yolanda Edwards. And I literally said in front of all these people, essentially like, oh my gosh, I want to work for Martha Stewart. So basically said to my boss, like, hey, I want to work for this other person. But within 2 months, I was then working at Martha Stewart Living. So they helped me make those introductions. It was an incredible act of kindness to see that I was ready to transition sort of out of a kitchen and maybe into more of an editorial role around food. I was still trying to figure out what I wanted to do in the culinary space, and there really are just so many cool options. And so I began working in the magazine in an editorial assistant capacity. So certainly very low on the totem pole, but because of what I just said, Martha being so involved with everything, really everyone had such access to her. She was always there. She was always part of the stories, the brainstorming. And so I had met her a few times and was able to then help with her holiday parties in her home, which was just a cool experience to be around her in a more personal setting. And just, every touch point I had with her was really quite inspiring. And you're right, her attention to detail, she would walk into a room and move maybe a flower vase like an inch. And it's like, oh yeah, it looks better that way. It was really remarkable what she would do and see. And so, I don't know, I just have such vivid memories of meeting her and being around her.
It sounds like me. Anytime a drawer is like an inch open, I have to close it. So
yes.
two peas in a pod there. From food to the world of food going through a baby's digestive system, which that I believe is the most vivid segue I've ever made. But let's talk Pluie, which I'm assuming, because I literally just Googled this before recording, but I'm assuming Pluie, the name comes from the French word for rain.
It does.
Really interesting. What's the story behind that? Do you have a French language background or something?
Well, it's culinary related, which is cool. So I went to college for a year and a half and I dropped out to go to culinary school. That was a little more risky, I think, than it is today. Having a traditional education was important. Certain jobs you apply to really required that BS or as in bachelor's degree, not BS, but it was a bolder move, I think, when I did it in 2006. And so I really just wanted to learn to cook, and I'd never even worked in restaurants. Certainly my parents thought this might be a little of a crazy idea, but I left the traditional educational plan I had and went to culinary school in France. And I lived in Avignon in the South. And I chose the school because it was a way to get a degree that was nationally accredited, but quickly. So instead of attending a full 2-year program at one of the traditional culinary institutes in America, where you also receive an associate's degree, I just wanted to do a 6-month program where I could learn to cook, but then get that equivalent degree in the culinary arts side. And so I found this program. I flew to France. I learned French in school, but when you think you know French and then you work in a French kitchen, I'll tell you, you don't know French. But learned quite quickly because of the way you speak with food. You can really demonstrate a lot. Chefs would show me things with their knives and explain it, and it's visual, so you could learn quickly. And by the time I did end up leaving Avignon, I was relatively fluent. But I was there in the rainy season, in the end of spring. It was towards the end of my culinary school, and I was placed in a 3 Michelin star restaurant to do a stage. And I worked alongside an incredible chef. That restaurant is connected to the Pope's Palace. And after I graduated, I asked if I could stay and live there and continue to work for free. And I did that for about 6 months, lived on one of the chef's essentially like side apartments, and really did learn the language and sort of the culinary world in a French kitchen, which is so different than America. And so I just have vivid memories of walking to this restaurant, and it would just rain every day, but it felt so clean because we would always smell like fish and cheese, like you're just cooking all day. And in France, you do. It's called le même équipe. So you have the same team for both services, lunch and dinner. So you're cooking all day, and you have a break in the middle, and it would rain. And so rain to me felt like this fresh, clean start. And I would have an umbrella, which is called parapluie in French. And
I was going to guess that.
Yeah, and that felt very protective. It was like you could look up and, be, protected from the outer elements. And so we wanted it to be obscure, something that isn't like the Diaper Depot or, whatever, nothing like too constrained, but love the idea of what like Yeti has done, or an Uber, where, Yeti's a great example where it's the brand name, but it also can really apply as they build a larger product portfolio, wanting it to be kind of obscure, but also kind of sound babyish and sweet and approachable. Pluie kind of, someone says now sounds like pooey, which is fine. That makes sense. But
yeah, that's not the worst problem to have.
Not the worst problem, but I loved the idea of it being fresh and clean, and this idea of rain. You'll see the raindrop in the eye of the Pluie logo. And to me too, leaving my entire culinary career behind, at the point when I left, I'd written 11 cookbooks, was on these television shows, and it felt like a similar risk that I took when leaving college. And so to me, it feels personal. It like reminds me of kind of this experience I had 15 years ago. But for the brand itself, it was also just sort of a sweet name.
Open the wormhole of French cooking and French naming origin. It's a really beautiful name. I love it. And the fact that it has that extra meaning attached to it is great. It is fun to say as well.
And we want it to be a noun. I think any brand creating a product like this, trying to disrupt a space, it's like, we want people to start to think, oh, do they have Pluie, right? Somewhere like a Kleenex box. And again, we're far away from that, but that's kind of a hope. And so it's just, I think it's so cool to name a product, and I'll never forget having the idea for Pluie and then designing it with an industrial designer and then hiring someone to do the logo. Some would say like, you don't even have a product, but you have a logo. But I do think that's such an important thing to invest in early on, because we did it right. We were able to trademark the tagline. We worked with a really amazing designer who created such a great brand identity that, years ago when we were just thinking it was an idea, we've never had to change it and rebrand it. And so I think it is, although it feels silly to invest that early in the logo and the meaning behind it, and then the imagery, I think it's such a cool way to set up your business for success later on.
Hey, it's baby steps. You'll be the Kleenex of the baby changing world in no time. Where did the idea for Pluie as a product get born in the first place?
I have two kids. Cooper is now 4 and Claire is 2. But when Cooper was a baby, so he was the one I was pregnant with on Food Network Star.
A famous, so it really, the TV star before even knowing it.
Yes, and I will say back to Bobby Flay quickly. He was, of course, very still serious, but he did say to me at the finale when I was pregnant, he said, "You can tell your kid his mom is a badass."
Oh, that's amazing.
That's the nicest thing I think anyone will ever say to me. But anyway, Cooper was in my belly. He was born. And I had never changed a diaper before, Max. Literally, I'm one of those moms in the hospital who was like, I've never babysat kids. Like, nurse, please come home with me. I don't know what to do. And really, instantly, like my whole world changed, right? It was like all of a sudden I had all these new products, new experiences, and was opened up into a whole really new world. And I'd never seen a diaper, or I've always seen diaper changing tables in public restrooms, but never really noticed or cared. My husband and I were at a fast casual burger restaurant and he had a blowout. And I really was like, ugh.
Wait, for anybody like myself who, when you hear blowout, thinks of like a truck's tire blowing up or something, what can you describe that picture in baby sense?
Yes. A blowout is when his poop is so big or runny, it like goes all the way up the diaper and can go up to like their head, essentially. I mean, it's like, up the back. It's like it blows out the diaper, essentially. So it's like, what do? Do you leave? But we just ordered food. So my husband went into the men's room and there was no changing table. And he comes out with this, and I'm like, and instantly my interest was piqued. It was like, that's so weird. Like, why wouldn't there be a changing table in the men's room? Like, that's insulting. That's bizarre. And Max, I'm telling you, we're not like at a mom and pop shop. This is a national chain of restaurants where it's really interesting that on a corporate level, they would make that decision to say, hey, let's just put it in the women's room because dads don't change diapers. So I went into the women's room, don't need to get into the difficulty of the experience, but it was just that. It was difficult. My purse is on the floor. It was just everything about it was really inconvenient, to the point that I almost thought it'd be easier to just go into our car. And the number one thing, of course, that really stood out to me was that it just felt so dirty. Everything about these changing tables you see in public, you just don't know, like, when was it cleaned? Who was on it last? And whether it is dirty or not, it feels and looks dirty. And this was in 2018. So this was now almost, this was 3 years ago. This was pre-pandemic. And, the idea of germs and the sensitivity to that, I think, wasn't as heightened back then. But I got back to the table after what felt like an eternity and literally said to my husband, I think we could make a better one. And my background, of course, in culinary, one of my favorite careers or parts of my career was working at a firm called Gravity Tank. And it was an innovation consulting firm, and we developed products and services for large companies. And so anything from the Samsung Galaxy platform to the next Doritos potato chip. And so my job as a culinary designer was to work with these large brands to come up with a pipeline of innovation for 2 to 4 years. And so I worked with Starbucks, Doritos, like I said, all sorts of amazing companies, and had an understanding of design thinking, of the importance of research, of how to create an idea for a product. But what was so fun about that job was like, here, Starbucks, go make this, good luck. So we never actually kind of full on then developed that product, but I did have experience in coming up with what you needed to do to get it to that stage. And so I had this innovation itch of some sort. And I've had some funny food ideas in the past, but when I said to my husband, like, this is so weird, koala care was invented in the 80s by 2 men, in Minnesota, and nothing has changed. And why? Like, why hasn't anything changed about these changing tables? And his interest was peaked as well, which is always validating to me because he's had much more of a traditional educational and career background. He has an MBA. He's thought some of my food ideas were silly. So, his interest was validating. And, later that night, we kind of Googled a few things and said, wow, like, this is a huge opportunity. There are 4 million restrooms in the United States for public use, and 15 states require by law for changing tables to be in all of them. And so it's like the market segment is huge. How could we penetrate some of that with a better changing table. And so we began talking to just some friends of ours, and what's so cool about the idea and the product is that it is so obvious and intuitive. Like the changing tables we see in restrooms kind of suck, right? Like anything we do to make it more comfortable, more convenient, and of course, cleaner would be better. And so that was
right. I mean, all the time, the amount of naps I've taken just laying on them and just chilling in there, it's disgusting.
I will say, Max, to that point, like, not everyone uses them, but everyone sees them. And that's what's interesting about it, is that it really is a direct reflection, though, on that business or brand. I go into Starbucks and see a dirty changing table. I wonder what the barista station looks like. Is it clean? Do they care? And so it's really, I do believe it's more than a table. And I think a lot of people are going to start to notice restroom sinks and hand dryers, and a lot has changed in that space. Things are touchless, toilets, etc. And changing tables are just sort of one of the last things that have changed.
You mentioned blowout earlier, and one of the things that blows me out. Never mind, that doesn't sound right. One of the things that blows me away is the technology in the actual Pluie changing table system. I'm just going to add words to describe what your product is, but it is so cool, and definitely should look up the pictures online. Like, it has UVC light, which I didn't even know existed, but apparently is incredible at killing bacteria. It's got a place to hold your purse, has a comfort bedding / foam for your baby. I mean, it's really super high tech and very efficient. So kudos to you on all that technology. But what was involved in identifying what technology could go into this and deciding on what to actually use?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I used to say Pluie was so easy to design because we were designing against a piece of plastic. Anything we were to do would make it more comfortable, more convenient, and cleaner. And by doing all of those things is that there's a reason those changing tables really haven't evolved for so many years, because it's really hard to do it. There are a lot of certifications and compliance around changing tables, of course, that we adhere to, but the entry or the barrier to entry, I think, is high, because you have to be compliant with ADA, FCC, ASTM. It's very challenging to create a product in a public restroom.
I can't even say CEO, so I would not be able to do any of those acronyms.
Well, and then you go ahead and throw in a light system. And so now it's like, all right, let's put a baby, 27 inches above the ground, and there's an electrical component behind your baby with a bulb. And that's what we really wanted to address. We wanted to talk about it being comfortable, convenient, and clean. And the comfort part was easy. It's like, how do we just make it softer? It's very awkward to put a baby on a rock hard piece of plastic. More convenient. We have the multi-purpose handles to hold your diaper bags and backpacks, and the security strap that retracts back in is one of my favorite features, because not a lot of parents use the safety belt, but we are required to have one. And so the ones you currently see on units are often damaged and broken, which is actually a huge liability to the business. And so ours retracts back in. If you don't want to use it, it's not there. And if you do, you can pull it over the baby's belly and hook it on the other side. But the cleanliness part was like the number one thing we needed to address. And we started by designing it with even just color and communicating cleanliness by having our product be white and shiny and navy blue to hide some, any sort of like hair or dust, because the products you often see now in restroom, they're that kind of beige. And so there's a lot you can do around just industrial design of how to make this look and appear just a little more aesthetically. But the UVC light system, and that obviously is like this part of this product, that is what was recognized by Fast Company earlier this year as a world-changing idea. And we have another award to announce soon, but that came up. Max, I was similar to you. I baked cookies for a living, right? Like I did not.
How did you know what I do for a living?
No, but I was similar to you that I didn't know what UVC light was. And one of our brainstorm sessions, it was like, well, hey, why don't you just put, a couple light bulbs behind it? And I was like, okay. And that was really how it came about. And it sounds simpler than it is, because the testing that went through. Talk about photobiological exposure. We cannot expose anyone to UVC light. We have, of course, had to then test the microbial efficacy. So can this actually sanitize the surface? So there was a lot of science behind putting a system in Pluie, but it's really an incredible way to clean this table after every use. It's repeatable, it's quick, and it's effective. And it's simply not something that colleagues at a store, at a stadium, at a hotel can replicate, because you do not know when a baby is changed. And so we guarantee with Pluie that after every single use, our entire table is sanitized within 60 seconds. And it's really, honestly, a game changer for businesses. They are now able to reduce harsh chemicals that they currently use on changing tables, and they really don't need to spend the time going in there as frequently as they should.
That's so cool. That literally came from a brainstorm, and it was just one of those.
I didn't know what it was.
Yeah, one of those beautiful ideas. Sometimes the best ideas and best solutions are those that at first glance are like, why would we do that?
And Max, we filed a patent. I practically still didn't even understand it, but it was like, okay, this is cool. How do we file a patent for this? And so we filed in July of 2019. Our patent was granted earlier this year in January of 2021, which is a fast and amazing review period for us. But what was so neat too is that, when I was then raising some capital pre-pandemic with this product, I'm not kidding. People are like, does it burn the baby? Like, is it a tanning bed for the baby? And now today, fast forward, every sales conversation I have, no one even asks about UVC light. It's like the education that has been done for us to the consumer and to our customer is really quite remarkable, because of COVID and because of all the UVC light stuff that's now just much more prevalent, I think.
Well, that's a no-brainer. I mean, everybody knows the most important thing in raising a baby is that the baby's tan. Like, that's the number one thing that you should. How do you look at the different markets for this product? Because, as you mentioned, I think, would you say 4 million public restrooms out there? That's a ton of restrooms. That's a ton of opportunity for Pluie out there. But it's a ton of different type of businesses. How do you view kind of your priorities there?
Yes, this is a really cool question because
thank you.
we've had to shift a little. So, the idea originally was that Pluie belongs in every restroom, right? It should be in a parks and rec, a playground. It should be in an airport. It should be in a high-end hotel. Truly, every restroom should have Pluie. This should be what changing tables are. And we were able to accomplish that in the beginning. So we wanted to launch and really prove that concept out for a lot of reasons. One, to continue to raise capital, to try and get different market segments. And so we were successful in getting a hotel, getting a restaurant, getting a pediatric office, getting a hospital. And with the pandemic, who right now needs Pluie? And so we had this original hypothesis, of course, that it's like zoos, aquariums, places where people go with kids, right? That's where you're going, you're changing diapers. And what we found is that the customers that really see the value quickly are people that understand the technology. So hospitals and healthcare, and then places that are really trying to welcome people back and have the money to spend, and so we're seeing stadiums as a big opportunity for us, and gyms or fitness places. And so it's really interesting trying to navigate, who is our customer? Is it an aquarium where there's a lot of babies there? Or is it actually, a hotel chain who wants to reduce their, harsh chemical use or cleaning time that staff is spending in restrooms? So it's like, we're kind of just trying to figure out who our customer is. And I think the pandemic is dramatically, changing that even on a daily basis or monthly. There was a point in time where we were hitting restaurants really hard. And then it's like, restaurants aren't open, or they're not at capacity, or their biggest problem right now is retaining their staff and being able to pay their employees, not by changing tables, right? And that's okay, because I think in a few years that will shift, and then they will want to focus on their restrooms. So it's like, we're just constantly trying to learn who our customer is and really be respectful of the other challenges they have. I certainly am cautious about emailing places that have other things going on, right?
Lots of decisions for Addie and the Pluie team to make in a good way, good opportunities to have, great potential routes to go. And you might have some decisions to make as well. Do I eat breakfast this morning? Do I put my left sock on first or my right sock on? Do I even wear socks this morning? should I start a podcast for my business or my brand? That's kind of the natural order of decision making every single morning. But if you are interested in starting a podcast, you're really intrigued by it, you know it can help your business, know it can help out your personal brand, but it's a ton of work. It's pretty overwhelming. And once you get into it, you realize, holy shit, this is even more work than I thought it could be. Hit me up at max@maxpodcasting.com. I will take loads off your plate. Now, I'm not able to take loads of dirty diapers off your plate. That's something Addie can help out with. But I can help you save tons of time with your podcast and deliver that high-quality podcast you deserve. Email me at max@maxpodcasting.com. Now, let's wrap up with some rapid-fire Addie fire. Let's wrap up with some rapid-fire Q&A. We'll get a little messy or dirty here. You ready for it?
Yeah, I think so.
All right, there we go. The enthusiasm is off the charts. Let's get wild. What is the most creative food concoction that you've ever concocted?
Oh my gosh. Well, we used to call them mashups, but trying to mash up like a savory and salty with a sweet product, and we would do it for companies. So for Doritos, it was like Doritos ice cream cones, like a Doritos chip basically with vanilla ice cream.
Ooh, that almost sounds like a Taco Bell creation or something.
Yeah.
What is your number one tip besides using Pluie for cleaning up your baby mess?
I guess I'm an over wipe user. It's like just use as many wipes as possible. Just throw wipes at the problem.
Exactly. In addition to that weird talent, what is a weird talent you have that maybe your family, somebody calls you out for, doesn't really impact the actual product or your ideas related to Pluie, but you just have a knack for it?
I have a very good memory. So my husband calls it an elephant brain, but there are things I remember that I think other people do not. So it often comes up out of context, which then gets confusing because I'll just say something that no one else is thinking about. So I don't know if it's a talent or an odd quirk, but I have a good memory.
I'll give you credit for both of them. That's great. I'll hit you up in like 20 years asking about if I could pronounce CEO correctly. What is another fact about Martha Stewart you think people would be completely surprised by?
Well, she is as beautiful as she looks, I will say. So a lot of times people probably see her in QVC and, you imagine on all these images and magazines, you're photoshopped or there's a lot of makeup, but in person, she is stunning. And she used to be a model. So now a lot of people know that. So she was a model in her 20s and still looks like one in her late 70s, for real.
Amazing. Perfect. And then last one, what is your number one dream location for a Pluie?
Oh, wow. Yeah, that's good. I think I have to say Disney World and Disneyland. I think it's a place. Yeah. And it really, Pluie would just be such an amazing addition to everything they do to make it magical.
It seems like a magical fit. That's perfect. Addie, thank you so much. This was amazing. Really appreciate and appreciate your story and tips and everything you have to share. Just love your product and really excited to see it grow. Where is the best place for people to connect with you and to learn more about Pluie?
Oh, that's great. Yes. Please follow us on Instagram. We're trying to grow our social media presence. It's at hello_Pluie. And on LinkedIn. And we'd love for people to take pictures of places they are that needs a changing table, and we'll do our best to get Pluie there.
Awesome. And that's hello_Pluie.
Yes.
A little extra spelling bee for you. And then last thing, whatever you want, final thoughts. It could be words to live by, a favorite quote, or just advice you have on changing your baby. Send us off here.
Yeah, that's a good one. I think that the number one thing I've learned in this journey is to share your ideas as soon as you have them, because I held off on a while. And then the minute I shared what I was doing with more people, the more I learned and the more support I had. So kept it close to the chest for confidentiality reasons for far too long, potentially. And the minute we really announced it to the world was when things really started to pick up. So if you have an idea, if you're working in your garage on something, share it with people and you'll be surprised by how much support and you will get.
Thank you, Addie, for sharing those helpful tips on sharing, and shout out Sharon. Thank you for sharing your awesome story as well. The super cool, super clean, super blue, super Pluie things you're up to at Pluie. And thank you, wild listeners, for tuning in to another episode. If you want to hear more wild stories like this one, make sure to follow the Wild Business Growth Podcast on your favorite podcast app. That's follow with a capital F, double underline, italicize, maybe put a tilde on top as well. I don't know. And tell one of your closest friends, a dear, 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 dear friend, about the podcast. It will brighten their day, maybe turn them into a hippo, maybe not. You can also find us on Good Pods, where you can check out some seriously good podcasts. And for any help with podcast production, you can learn more at MaxPodcasting.com. Until next time, let your business run wild.
Bring on the bongos!